Hello and welcome to Thursday Thoughts. Thursday Thoughts? What on earth are they, I hear you ask? Well, my friend Lucy and I meet every week over on Instagram to talk all things personal growth because she is as obsessed with it as I am. And we decided that we might as well put those conversations out as a weekly podcast. So now you can listen to us chat here on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we'll be talking about topics such as spirituality, limiting beliefs, the ego, imposter syndrome, gratitude, meditation, confidence, and so much more. So if you're ready, here we go. Today, we are going to be talking about intuition, which I don't think we've talked about so
I don't think we
far.
have either.
So
No.
yes, let's do it. Let's talk about intuition. Shall I start?
Yeah. Go for it.
Well, so let's think. Intuition. It's such an interesting subject, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
we all have intuition, and it's that sort of ability, that knowing inside us, which just helps guide us through life and guide our decision making, but without getting our sort of logical, conscious mind too involved in the process. And I presume we developed an intuition because it initially probably helped us with our survival, having to make quick, fast decisions in the moment. But I think, we can all relate to what intuition is. I always think about it. You just have a feeling, you hunch and knowing when something's right, when something's not right. You might have found yourself in a situation in the past where you just think, this is not right. There is something not right here. I
Mm.
don't like it. I've got to get out. And that is just sort of a knowing, a feeling. And you listen to it. I think a big problem in today's modern world is many of us have become so disconnected from our bodies and from feeling because the modern world really values logical, conscious reasoning. And because we are often so busy, stressed, we lose that connection with our intuition, with our feelings, with what's going on internally,
Mm.
that we stop listening and we don't know. We start to question, is that right? Is that not right? Rather than trusting. So perhaps what we could do today is really just talk about maybe some of the reasons why that happens, but then also some tools which you and I maybe you feel that we find useful to start really nurturing our intuition.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, as you said, I think the thing about intuition is that part of the problem is that you said, we aren't so connected with our intuition anymore. And I think it's partly because we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust our intuition as being like, intuition is a bit woo, isn't it? It's like, oh, it's a feeling.
Yeah.
So often we're like, well, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm going to listen to what that person says or what I feel like I should be doing. And so I think often for many of us, that feeling inside of us is the last thing that we end up following, when actually I believe so much in intuition. And I also refer to intuition when listening to intuition, to me, it's the same as following your heart, and I've always been one of those people who I always really follow my heart. I mean, there's times I haven't, but more often than not, I will always be that person who just goes with that feeling. And I think that's the thing, people may say, but I don't know what my intuition says, and I understand that, and sometimes I don't either. But I think actually, if we get still and we get quiet, we know when there is a feeling in the pit of our stomach, just a kind of it's a knowing. It really is a knowing. But I think another issue with it is that our intuition can get drowned out by our ego. So actually we have to work out when it's our ego trying to tell us something and when it's our intuition. And the way that I've talked about this before on my podcast. I think I did a mini-sode about this ages ago. But the way that I tend to differentiate between the two is your ego will always be really loud and really like arsey and insistent in a not particularly nice way. Whereas your intuition is just that much quieter, but just really persistent voice inside of you saying, that's not what you want to do, or that you want to do that. And even though everyone around you is saying, oh my God, it's crazy, or you're mad to do that, or why would you do that? Because it's unsafe or unknown or unfamiliar or whatever. But when that sort of still small voice of calm inside you is telling you to do something, you should listen. We need to listen. There is a reason why we have this intuition that is guiding us. And the thing is, it may not always be sending us down the path of, the 9 to 5, 2.5 children. It might be sending us down a very different path. And we still should listen to it, because again, it's I think we have to learn how to distinguish between what our ego is trying to tell us. And we have to always remember that our ego, while it's there to protect us, also it protects us in a way that we don't actually need protecting. We don't need protecting anymore from a saber-toothed tiger or a fucking woolly mammoth. Our ego thinks we need protecting from making a phone call that is scary, or sending an email that makes us feel uncomfortable. So sometimes we have to just really watch that, because our ego can just sort of take over, and it doesn't like anything that is unfamiliar. It doesn't like anything that feels unsafe. But so often, if we want to up-level our lives, we have got to go down that path of the more unfamiliar things and the things that feel uncomfortable. The ego really does not like discomfort. It will always try and keep us safe and comfortable doing the same things that we've done over and over again, things that are known. Whereas the intuition, I think, will point us more in the direction of things that aren't necessarily known, but just something that feels right for us. So it is tapping into that feeling of what feels right. And I'm sure we can all think of a situation in life where, it felt like the right thing to do was one thing, but we knew that our heart was saying to us, but I don't want that. That's not what I want. And how many of us do things in life? We've all done it. We've all done something many, many times, many things in our lives that we've done despite what our intuition was telling us. But I think it's just really important to remember and remind ourselves of the fact that our intuition is there for a reason. If our intuition is, take, relationships. If your intuition is telling you that something is off, then something is off. And we all know what that feeling is like. I take the example of my ex-boyfriend. I knew something was off from day one, and I chose to ignore it. But my intuition, that little, very sort of quiet but insistent voice, was saying, there's something wrong here, but I decided to drown it out because I just didn't want to hear it. Sometimes we don't want to hear our intuition, because often it does lead us down the perhaps more difficult path.
Yeah. I mean, throughout my working life, my intuition has totally guided me. And
same.
With every decision I've made, I've kind of followed that gut feeling of like, oh God, no, this isn't the path I need to be on. It's actually this path. I mean, when I went into teaching, I used to work in PR, public relations, and I went into teaching, and I just kind of found myself, because I just followed what I wanted to do, volunteering in this local primary school. And before I knew it, so suddenly it was like, oh my God, this is what I should be doing. This is what I need to be doing. And then before I knew it, I was in there, I was teaching, and I missed this sort of round of on the job training. And it was so weird. I just kind of knew that this was where I should be. And then, almost like magic, suddenly this place just came up in this school I happened to be working in. And it was just, it just kind of was a real sign that, oh my goodness, this is what I'm meant to be doing, because it's all just falling into place. And sometimes, and you're right, sometimes it can feel really difficult. At the moment, I'm in that place where I've been listening to my intuition. Did lots of work in menopause, for ages. I had a podcast and all a lot of things with menopause, but my intuition has been telling me that great, I'm really glad you did all of that, but actually there's a different sort of pathway for you. And the easy option would have been just to stay with what I was doing because I knew what I was doing. Everything was going really well. And yet, annoyingly, sometimes it can be really frustrating. I chose a different path because I chose to listen to what was the right feeling, what was inside of me, and go down a slightly different route. Has it been easy? No, absolutely not. And sometimes do I constantly think, oh, I wish I had stayed doing what I was, sometimes I do. But you just have to trust. I
Yeah,
think this is the big part of it. You've just got to trust
yeah,
that if you listen to it, it will lead you and guide you down the right road and you
totally.
will end up in the right place. And we always talk about that, it's when when you trust, so much of life is on trust. And when we can actually really lean into that, then it will all, it will turn out okay because something there's that inner knowing, that inner knowledge, that inner something, whatever it is. And I do think part of it is a lot of it is all of the experiences and learning and information you've just absorbed through your lifetime, maybe through other lifetimes. It's just everything which has come, and you just haven't got that conscious ability to be able to process it. So actually what happens is your intuition takes over because subconsciously it kind of knows the path for
Yeah,
you. So
yeah,
it is a really big act of trusting
yeah,
what is right, what is wrong, and it's something you can practice as well. I think you can, if you are somebody, and I've ignored my intuition, I know on many occasions, but if you're someone who's like, oh, I don't know if it's right or wrong, and then you start to doubt yourself, you can trust on a very simple day-to-day basis. You can kind of almost say, okay, do I want to go for a walk, or do I want to go for a run, or do I want to eat this apple, or do I want to eat this pear? And just listen to the feeling inside you, that whatever it is that makes that decision,
yeah,
that's your intuition telling you. So you can kind of, it is that knowing. Things like hunger is like a feeling. It's kind of just tuning into those internal feelings and sensations
yeah,
which kind of give you an answer. Am
yeah,
I hungry? Do I want to eat now, or should I wait a bit later? Well, all of those sorts of yes or no answers
yeah.
are very much within us and can be practiced.
Totally. And just to pick on what you were saying about that, that's the thing. It's so often we need to, we want to get at, this is a classic example of where we want to get out of our mind and into our body. It's like, stop listening to your mind, because our mind tells us a load of bollocks on a regular basis. We've got to I'm reading The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle at the moment in my book club, in my membership, and it's such a great book. I mean, bloody hell, it's hard work, but it takes quite a lot of wrapping your head around what he's trying to say, but it is
That's so
brilliant.
funny.
It is absolutely brilliant.
I'm listening to it on
Oh,
audiobook at the moment. That's
are
funny that you're
you?
listening. Yes,
Oh
yeah,
my
it's
god,
quite,
that's so
yeah.
funny. Oh my god. Well, I listen. I think I've told you this before, but I listen on Audible and read the hard copy at the same time. I find that is a game changer in terms. Going off on a complete tangent, but that is a game changer in terms of consuming books. And what I normally do is I speed up the Audible to about 1.25 or 1.5, and I sit there and read the book at the same time as listening. And I find, especially with personal growth books, my god, it helps. It goes in so much easier and quicker. It's been a game changer. And of course,
Right.
because I have to do podcasts on all the books that we read for the membership, so I've really got to listen, I've really got to be in it. Anyway, Eckhart Tolle talks all about, I've completely forgotten what the hell my point was now, but it's that it's that getting out of, we've got to stop identifying with our mind, because what we do, the problem with the mind is that not only does it tell us a load of bollocks every day on a regular basis, also it means that we, rather than being fully in the present, what we tend to do is we're either living somewhere in the past or we're living somewhere in the future. And the idea obviously is to get into the now. When it comes to intuition, this is a classic. Like, we've got to be out of our mind we've just got to get out of our thinking mind and into our body. And so often you can literally feel, I mean, going back to my ex, I I could feel it in my, in the pit of my stomach. I could feel that something was off. I could feel that something was wrong. And actually, another kind of big thing that I follow my intuition, and I have, as I say, more often than not in my life, kind of followed my heart. But the story, and some of my listeners do as well, that I worked at Radio 2 for a long time, and then I did something crazy, and I left it to go and train to become a freaking detective, which I absolutely hated with a passion that burned in my soul. I couldn't bear it. Anyway, long story short, so I'd left this amazing career at Radio 2 for reasons I won't go into now, but ended up becoming a trainee detective. And within about 5 seconds, I knew in my heart that it was wrong. Literally from day one or day two. In fact, day one, I knew. But my ego was going, but you've just left Radio 2. You've just told your family and friends, you've done, and people thought I was pretty crazy leaving Radio 2. They were like, what? I'd worked for years to get into Radio 2, and then I'd done this crazy thing, la 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 la. And my mind was going, well, you can't, you can't possibly, you got, you got to suck this up now. You've made this decision. You've already left one career. You can't leave another one. And in the end, what happened was that I got ill. Like, I got mentally ill and physically ill because of this job, because it was just awful and I just hated it so much. And I kind of kept at it, and I kept saying, my ego is saying, you can't leave. What are people going to say? It's going to look really bad. You can't do this. What are you going to do? Like, what are you going to do with your life? But my intuition, literally my soul, and my intuition were screaming, sort of silently screaming at me, Lucy, get the hell out. And in the end, it was insane timing, because it was just before COVID. Like, literally, it was like February 2020, and I actually got signed off by my GP. I ended up leaving work one day and walking into my GP surgery without an appointment, and I just went up to the receptionist. I was like, is there any way I can see a doctor? And I ended up seeing my lovely GP, who is this lovely guy. Walked into the room. The minute I shut the door, I just burst into tears, and it all came out. And bless him, he signed me off. And then, like, a month later, we went into lockdown. And it was during those first couple of months that basically I was thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? But actually, I knew in my heart that I was never going back to that fucking godforsaken place. I just knew, because it is a godforsaken place, make no mistake. I just knew. And so I did this crazy thing, and I handed my notice in the middle of lockdown. I had no idea what I was going to do. I ended up, as you know, becoming my sister's cleaner and getting a part-time job in a coffee shop. But at the time, it seemed like insanity. It seemed crazy. Like, what are you doing? You've left one career, now you're leaving another one in the middle of lockdown, when people are like losing jobs left, right, and centre. What are you doing? But I remember thinking to myself, I know.
Yeah.
I know, because my intuition is telling me this is the right thing to do, 100%. And honestly, I remember, I look back, I think, bloody hell, I literally phoned up about a job as a delivery driver, because as I say, it was the middle of lockdown. Of course, delivery drivers were the only people that were kind of working, because some of the only people. But, I didn't care. I felt my intuition was so insistent. And despite the fact that it was really scary and I had no idea what I was going to do, I just knew that my intuition was telling me to get out. And subsequently, that is why I ended up starting this podcast. Which is what led me to getting a book deal. Everything I'm doing now, it's led me to my membership. None of that would have happened had I not done this quote unquote crazy thing and left Radio 2 and then left the detective thing. But it's because it was literally, the universe was trying to lead me to where I was supposed to be, which is doing what I'm doing now. And I might add that even though what I'm doing now is bloody hard and it's very difficult in many ways, and, it's financially really worrying and scary, but I still know intuitively that I'm on the right path. So yeah, we really have to listen to that little voice inside of us, and not allow that loud, insistent, but often kind of, unpleasant ego voice to persuade us to do something that we know isn't right for us. Because again, going back to what I said at the very beginning, we know if we actually allow ourselves to listen, we know.
Yeah.
A very quick break to ask you to hit the follow or subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you're enjoying this episode, I'd be super grateful if you could hit those stars and rate it too. Thank you.
I love that story so much, because it's amazing, is it, when you can look back now, you can see that it was all part of the plan. It was all had to happen. All those parts had to happen to get to where you are now. But when you're in it, that's when it's so difficult, and that's when you have to trust. That's when you have to just trust, because you've got nothing else to hang on to other than that sort of trusting, that knowing. And I mean, I love that so much, Lucy. And you're so right when you say it's about getting out of the mind, because that's where often, which is the unhelpful part, often our thoughts take over, our ego takes over, and we tell ourselves so many unhelpful stories all of the time. Most of them are not true. And it's very, very, very hard to think your way out of a mind that is telling you stories. The best way is to get into your body. Yeah. And the sciencey bit of that is because, you probably have heard of the vagus nerve, which runs from your brain through to your gut. And the vagus nerve sends information up and down from the gut to the brain and brain to the gut, but it sends 80% of the information up from the belly to your brain, and only 20% from the brain down to your gut. So if you think about that like that, it is very difficult to think your way out of these unhelpful thoughts. That is why we really need to get into the body and listen to that's why it's called a gut feeling. Yeah. We get these feelings in our gut, and it sends information up to our brain. And sadly, we've just forgotten how to listen. We've all got it, but we've forgotten how to listen. So we really have to get into our bodies. And the best way to do that is just to get still and to find a practice that works for you, whether that is some sort of breath work, meditation, going for a walk in nature, doing whatever it takes. For some people, it might be lifting weights. Everybody has their own way of when they can get still and then they are in their body, they feel. It might be, going into a cold plunge or whatever it is. It's about feeling. Can you feel? Getting out of the mind. And, there's so much to that when we actually can feel. And actually, pain is a funny one, because often everyone tries to avoid pain. But sometimes if it's a bearable pain, that's a really good opportunity just to go, I'm in my body. Can I really feel what it feels like? That sounds a bit weird, but it's just about going inwards. So, at the beginning of every single one of my breathwork sessions, which I run, every single one, we spend at least 4 to 5 minutes just getting quiet, bringing our attention inwards. And you can do that very easily. You can do a body scan. You can just go through the body and consciously relax each part. Those are all techniques to get still, to get quiet, just to notice how you are feeling, asking yourself, how do I feel? Am I holding loads of tension in my jaw? How does my throat feel? I hold a lot of tension in my throat. Does it feel really tight? And it's just being able to tune into different parts of your body and noticing all of that is such good practice to then being able to really quiet out the noise in the mind of the ego and just feel into what is your body telling you? What is that knowing telling you? And that's the only way I can do it. I think I've always been quite fortunate, because I've always said all my life, I really trust my gut. To Giles is kind of like, sometimes hilarity. I'll be making a really important decision and I'm going, well, I just listened to my gut. Whereas he's someone who's very logical and needs to literally think out every single aspect of it, is very analytical, will really think about it. But ultimately, I'll always say, but what's your gut telling you? What's that feeling? And for me, that always overrides any sort of logic.
No, I feel exactly the same way. But the thing is, we're not taught to follow this feeling, this gut feeling. And there's so much sort of, I think people can be a bit judgy about if you do that rather than, well, no, I'm going to like add up this and I'm going to write a column of what is the pros and cons and blah, 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 blah. And actually, it's so much more simple than that. You just follow your freaking gut. Yeah. And I mean, I think some people do find that quite hard to do. And we are taught to be really logical and practical and look at, well, what do we know? What are the facts and blah, blah, blah. And the thing is, life isn't, we've got to remember that life is so much more than what we can see and hear and touch and taste and smell. It's about, this is the crazy thing. Here we are in the 3D world, and it's a tiny fraction of what actually is the truth of reality and what actually is out there. So whilst everybody's like, well, if you, I don't know, I can't think of an example, but the point is that we've got to remember that, it's not crazy and woo to trust your gut or trust something that isn't kind of concrete. Actually, in many ways, it makes total sense, because although we all do we're so limited in our thinking in this 3D world, and we only go with the things that we can actually see and there's sort of scientific proof, but there's so much more than that. We live in an infinite universe. We are literally sitting on a sphere in the middle of the universe that is flying through space. I mean, when you just think about the world and life like that, number one, it just makes you think, bloody hell, why do I worry about such crap? This is insane. When we are literally all just hanging on, sort of flying through space in this big ball of fire. And so I just think we've got to remember that, you can't, there doesn't always have to be an explanation for every single thing. You don't have to always make your decisions based on, but my mum said this and the government said that. And, there's a lot more to life and the world, a lot more than we can actually see. And actually, in many ways, we are wise to trust in that a bit more, trust a little bit more in the unknown, because most of the really exciting stuff is on the other side of that anyway, not on the side of what we already know and what is comfortable and what we've already done 1,000 times over. If we want to see different results, we have to do different things. Otherwise, we're going to keep getting the same results.
Yeah.
100%.
And the best way to go in, really, if you need any convincing that there is much, much more out there and that we are only a tiny fraction of it, go and look up Joe Dispenza and his work and watch some of his videos, because for me, he was the one who just opened my mind, because what I do love is that he does bridge that gap between the science and the woo. And yeah, it's just, there are the infinite potential is just vast, and we forget that. So when you think about your gut feeling and that feeling, that kind of instinct inside us, I mean, I think a gut feeling is different from instinct. I think instinct is just more survival based. Gut intuition is it's just more of a knowing. It's more of an inner knowing it's what your soul, it's kind of going back to your true essence and your soul, and it's kind of like a guidance system of what of where you want to be going and what is right for you, and kind of trying to get rid of all of the conditioning and pressures, societal pressures, and all of that thing which we take on. It's about really just getting properly true to yourself and following that. So
completely.
Yeah.
Well, it is 9:30 on the dot, so we're DONE done, baby.
Oh, well, thank you everyone if you've been listening or you have been watching. It's always a pleasure. I'd love to, if anyone's got anything they want to share about any of their experiences, we always love to hear them. So,
Exactly, absolutely.
Yeah,
well, we'll be back here this time next week talking about God only knows
something
what.
else. Exactly. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Lucy. Take care.
Lots of love, babe. Have a good day.
Yeah, you
Bye.
too. Bye.
Bye.